I'm glad my mum died. You don't forget a title like that in a hurry. It's memorable. It screams, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Or your mum. What does it say about human nature? It's darkly interesting and intriguing. So why is the media so obsessed with two throwaway lines about Ariana Grande? Hi everybody, my name is Scott. Welcome to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, a channel all about books. I love books that explore messed up relationships, and that is very much what this book promises. But I have a confession. Until I read this book, I didn't know who Jennette McCurdy was. I've never even heard of, let alone watched iCarly or Sam and Cat. I'm old. I've actually used a typewriter in a non-ironic or historical reenactment sense. Yes, it does have a backspace button. No, I have no idea how it works. When I first saw this book, my honest thoughts were clickbaity title, probably some dark comedy, forgettably falling short of B grade. Think Bella Mackey's How to Kill Your Family, or some sort of Flowers in the Attic style story of abuse, unlikely love, and a murder plot. I wasn't interested. But then I found out that it was a memoir, and I was hooked. This book starts off detailing McCurdy's relationship with her mother as she becomes an actor. Jennette's relationship with her mum is littered with warning signs. Being 4 and having her mum insist on wiping her bum, having her dad thrown out of her house and sleeping in his car on average once a month, being 15 and having to shower with her brother so that her mum can wash her hair perfectly. You as the reader know this isn't a healthy relationship, yet at the time it was normal for Jennette McCurdy. McCurdy writes about the financial pressures on her family, financial pressures which she is able to take away. As a 10-year-old, she becomes the main breadwinner for the family. It's a weird situation, and dealing with the pressure that becoming the main breadwinner has is even harder. She was only too aware that she was a child actor. She had become terrified of puberty, of growing boobs, of no longer being a child, of no longer being able to provide for her family. And that is a fear which McCurdy's mother used to convince her to calorie restrict. This led to a lifetime eating disorder, something which McCurdy still isn't over at the time of writing. If you suffer from an eating disorder, any eating disorder around food, I really do think you should consider skipping this book. At the very start of this book, McCurdy waits for her family to leave the hospital room which contains her mum in a coma, dying. Jennette knows she's about to wake her mum up. Once her family leaves, with confidence, she tells her mum, "I've achieved my goal weight, 89 pounds, a healthy weight for an 11-year-old. But McCurdy was 21. McCurdy's writing style is very simple and easy to digest. It's actually quite a good book if you're not a big reader and want to get back into reading. It's very accessible. Her style is very factual, very "this is what happened," followed by "this is how I felt about it." It's not emotive, it's not beautiful, but it's effective. It is what is required. And it is very accessible. Celebrity gossip. There's really two people who all the tabloids are talking about. McCurdy details a man who created and produced iCarly and details quite a predatory and abusive relationship. It is very easy to Google who that person is, but nonetheless, some videos discussing this have been taken down for naming him. So I'll play by the rules and not naming. In something completely unrelated, here are some easily searchable images of iCarly creator Dan Schneider with Jennette McCurdy. The comparison between McCurdy's relationship with her mother and with Schneider, the creator, is very interesting. How they're both controlling, how they're both very good at picking her up and making her feel great, but equally good at putting her down and making her feel low. I think this is a wonderful representation for people who might be in a non-violent but abusive relationship. To see this and to learn from this, to question their relationship. I think there is value in that and I think that's great. The other person getting mentioned in the tabloids is, of course, Ariana Grande. It is clear that McCurdy resents what she thinks of as preferred treatment of Grande. McCurdy was offered her own show after iCarly finished, a spin-off which she ended up sharing with Grande. McCurdy would ask for things like changes of schedules or to be written out of episodes so that she could do other projects, attend events, and she wasn't granted these. Yet Grande was conveniently locked in a box and written out of the show when she had conflicts. McCurdy clearly had a great working friendship with her iCarly co-star Miranda Cosgrove, a friendship she still has today, a friendship she doesn't have with Grande. But I find it really disappointing that the media has chosen to represent this as a rift between the two women. I am not friends with countless people that I have worked with in the past, and very, very few of them do I hate. McCurdy writes nothing mean about Grande. Grande doesn't come off worse for this book. This really just is an example of the media finding it easier and more clickbaity to invent a fight between Grande and McCurdy and assume that you won't read the book. If Grande's career had disappeared after Sam and Cat instead of exploded, I'm sure that this would be another example of the creator's mistreatment of McCurdy. I, however, find this the weakest part of the book. While McCurdy is able to empathize with her mother, the financial stresses they were under early in their relationship, and her mother's desire to see her daughter successful, even if it was what her mother wanted and not what McCurdy wanted. But I don't feel like we've been given enough information about the mistreatment of McCurdy in Sam and Cat and those shows. McCurdy doesn't like to name names, and we don't really get to see the dynamics. We don't get to see what strings are being pulled and why things have happened the way it was happening. She was promised the chance to produce an episode of Sam and Cat, one of her primary reasons for agreeing to perform on the show, only to have that taken away from her at the end of the shooting, only to be told somebody here doesn't want you to produce. Which leaves me to question, who promised McCurdy that she would be a producer? Who confided in her? And who didn't want her to produce? And these are not discussed. I don't know if people are deliberately trying to sabotage her career to control her, or if McCurdy is the victim of a large organisation and people simply not communicating with one another. Maybe there was some doubt around McCurdy's ability to produce. Maybe this is another example of abuse. And to be honest, I'm not sure if McCurdy doesn't know or if she's scared of the legal consequences of naming names. But this isn't the only part of the memoir where I would have liked a little more information. McCurdy has suffered from an eating disorder for 20 years, both anorexia and bulimia. And I don't know if she was ever hungry. I don't know how she ate the 500-calorie diet. I don't know if it was willpower. I don't know if she had a special trick. And granted, if she did have a special trick, I think it's probably for the best to not include tips for anorexia in a memoir. But I would like to know about how hard that was for her. Did she suffer to do that? Her transition from anorexia to bulimia, what were the motivations there? There is some stories around this, but I still don't know whether she was just hungry and gave in, or whether it was a desire to impress people and fit in and be normal. McCurdy talks about where she currently is with her eating disorder, and while she's clearly made massive steps, and it probably feels like she has recovered but will always have some issues, you, the reader, can clearly see that she still has a long way to go. I just wonder if this book was maybe written a little too soon. If she had have waited a couple of years, she may have gained some more insight, and this may have been an even better memoir. Because while anybody who is in an abusive relationship will hopefully be able to see themselves and have a moment of realization, I don't think the same is true for those with an eating disorder. While this book isn't perfect, it is very captivating. It is a book you just want to keep reading. You will rip through it very quickly. I feel that it delivers on the clickbaity title. And while often celebrity memoirs are little except for a charismatic person being charismatic, McCurdy did show us a lot of herself. She showed herself being vulnerable, she showed her growth, and it is written for the masses, which I think is wonderful because a lot of non-readers will read this book. And that's always a good thing because we need more bookish people. So if you are watching this review after reading this book and you want to know what is a good book to read next, I really recommend one of my favorite reads from last year, Chanel Miller's memoir, Know My Name. Chanel Miller was the victim of the Brock Turner rape case, and this is a book about how she had to deal with the courts, the police, the media, and so on. If you would prefer to read about an eating disorder, I really recommend Roxane Gay's memoir, Hunger, but please check the trigger warnings on that one. There's a couple of big and surprising ones if you're not familiar with Roxane Gay's life. Now, if you would like to branch out into fiction, I recommend Burnt Sugar, which is also called Girl in White Cotton in India and some other countries. This is a novel about an abusive mother-daughter relationship. If you'd prefer to read a novel about a mother with cancer, I recommend a book which I reviewed very recently, Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. Just click here. And while you're at it, click that subscribe button if you're new here and want to hear more about books. I enjoyed reading this book. It's engaging and interesting. I recommend it. Jennette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mum Is Dead gets 4 stars.